Habari Gani, Ma Induga Nadada. This is your brother, your elder, General Abu Amin Ra. My brothers and sisters, I'm going to diverge a truth as to why you are in the condition you are in today. Listen, my brothers and sisters, you are in this position, going through this dreadful process we're going through, generally because we chose to be in this condition. Wait a minute now, don't get upset, just bear with me for a moment. And I shall attempt to disclose to you how you're making the choice to be oppressed. Listen, my brothers and sisters, every moment of our lives we have to make decisions, whether to go left or right or forward or to turn backwards. Choice. Listen, let's face the fact and reality. When our first ancestors were captured and sold to slave traders on the west coast of Africa, they had to be marched hundreds of miles to get to the coast, the Atlantic Ocean, where the ships awaited them. So my brothers and sisters, listen carefully. Our brothers and sisters had the choice to say, no, I will not make this march. I'll be dead and buried in my grave before I take a step on this trek that ends in hundreds of miles on the west coast of Africa. They had the choice. Of course, the consequences were either liberation or death. And because we feared death, or our ancestors feared death, they ended up at Cape Castle or some other slave fort on the coast and were sold. Listen, my brothers and sisters, we lost millions of our people along the trek, when all we had to do was be humans and say, no, before I go, I'll be buried in my grave. But then, as they were taken to the forts, as I stated, and sold, they waited in those dungeons. And listen, my brothers and sisters, that had to be dreadful. I pity our ancestors. However, they had to make one more decision. Should they get on those ships? Or should they resist and let the white man put them in their grave? Did they believe in, before I be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave? Of course not. Perhaps they had never heard of that song, because that song was created in the United States of America by their descendants. But nevertheless, they still had the choice to say, no, I'm not going. And could have committed suicide or died through insurrections right there at the castles, the forts. Cape Castle is the one that's used in illustration here. But they were all the same. Now let me tell you this. At night, not every night, but at night, the Europeans who lived upstairs over the dungeons would have all the slaves, or the soon-to-be slaves, but all of the captives, rather, to line up in the courtyards while they stood on the balcony and chose which woman they wanted to molest and rape that night. My brothers and sisters, we went through a hell of a lot. We could have made the choice at any time and said no to it. And our journeys to the West, what they call the Western world, North and South America, and the Caribbean Sea area, could have been prevented All we had to do was say no. You didn't have to verbalize it, just take the stance of no. No, I won't go. And we would not have had to take those dreadful voyages across the Atlantic Ocean that sometimes took up to 2 months, when we were chained to our slots in the holds of the slave ships without urines or any kind of buckets to release themselves in. I think they had one bucket in each area of the area in which the captives were kept. And they often caught dysentery from the rocking of the ship or the eating of the bad food. And they vomited, urinated, defecated, running feces and urine down from where they laid to the person who laid beneath them. I know you can imagine the turmoil this caused. But they had a choice. They had a choice when they took them up on deck to exercise to keep them alive so they could demand a nice price. They had the chance to jump overboard rather than come to an unknown land, never to see your families again. Some did jump overboard. Many millions. Many millions others were thrown overboard because of their sickness. And the captain's focus on his profits. And he didn't want them, if they were infected with diseases, to pass it on to his other merchandise, which was our ancestors. But our ancestors had the choice, my brothers and sisters, to say, no, I will not go. Before I be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave. They never said a mumbling word like that, but they showed in action through revolts. And sometimes the capture of the ships, one in particular, that they made a movie out of. But listen, my brothers and sisters, we fought. But most of us didn't make the choice over being a slave or being buried in their grave. They didn't believe that. So many, many millions more died crossing the Middle Passages. My brothers and sisters, it's been estimated that only 2 out of 4 slaves survived to make it through the Middle Passages. So we lost many, many millions on those ships. Listen, my brothers and sisters. You must understand we have always had the choice. Our ancestors have had the choice to say no to anything oppressive and to be willing to die to make your dream, your stance solid and material in the world. So my brothers and sisters, we didn't make the choice to say no. Or we wouldn't have been here. All of us, all of our ancestors. What was their problem? But then there was another problem. You see, the white man had already infiltrated Africa and brought his Christian religion with him, or any other religion he had with him, and promised us, if you didn't live according to the dictates of that religion, you died. And when you died, at the end of your journey, you ended up in hell to suffer for eternity, burning in a fire organized by Satan that is 3 times hotter than any fire on the earth. So this filled our ancestors with fear, and they're still filled with fear because they don't want to go to this quote unquote hell that the white man created. It's just a tool of control they use. My brothers and sisters, we still have that same choice today. We don't have to stand around and let this man beat and molest us and our women and our children. We don't have to stand around while he does this. We can make the choice to move on his behind whenever and however he tries to treat us in an unjust manner. But we won't do that. We won't make that choice because we're too full of fear, the fear of death and hell that the Christian religion has bestowed upon us. Listen, my brothers and sisters, we can still make that choice today. As a matter of fact, we are making that choice today. Freedom or liberation. With the understanding that when we go for liberation and denounce freedom, the consequence might be our deaths. But we must be willing to die for our people, for our ancestors, and so that our descendants can edify us and lift us up as a people. So my brothers and sisters, you see, we are in control of this, and we give the control up to the European, or those who oppress us. Don't you know, think about it, think about it, think about it, that all you have to do is say no to this crap and stand up and be willing to die. But you must first overcome your fear of death. Ain't no hell. If there was another hell you had to suffer for doing wrong, that would make the God you worship a person who put you in jeopardy. You hear what I'm saying? Tricked you. Gonna make you die and burn a second time. Because that's what it would be if you go to hell after you're dying, double jeopardy. Because we have been in hell for over 400 years here in the United States of America. Quote, I made a mistake then, please. United Snakes of America. One of the worst social institutions on the planet. They can't help it. But my brothers and sisters, we can help ourselves. All we have to do is make the choice to be free. To say from this day forward, before I be a slave, before I be oppressed, before I be degraded, I'll be buried in my grave. And what that means and indicates, you're ready and willing to pick up the gun or the sword or the knife or the bullet or the fork or the shovel or whatever it takes to struggle with your enemy until either you have victory in life or victory in death. It's our choice. Does living an oppressed life, degraded the way we are every minute of every day, means more to you than sacrificing your life for your descendants, for your friends, for your people? We must all stand if we are to be liberated. We must all stand and in a united chorus say to them, before I be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave and go home, home, home and be with my folks. Do you understand what I'm saying? Until you can have that attitude, that disposition, that belief, that stance, and make the choice and say no to oppression, you shall ever, forever, forever, and ever be an oppressed people. Once again, peace and hotep to you, my brothers and sisters, but don't forget, freedom is a choice. Slavery is a choice. Or either slavery can be acquiescence. Let the slaver, the enslaver, define you, define your position in this world we live in. You have the choice to say no. You get out of life what you put into life. If you don't put anything but acquiescence and yes to what everybody else wants as opposed to what you want, which is no to it, you shall forever be encaptured until you get the strength, the determination, and stand and say no to all this BS, all this rubbish that came out of the thought patterns of the people of Europe. Once again, y'all, peace and hotep to you, my brothers and sisters. Wake up and realize you have a choice in this. And make the right choice, which is freedom, liberation, or my death. Hotep.